Welcome to the first live stream of DevVenture with MTK. This will be about the project status that I've come to so far since I made the first announcement a few months ago now. And I'm going to show you the progress that I've made so far, and then we'll get as far as we can with the project after that. So the beginning stage of this live stream will be showing you the overall setup that I've done so far. And then I'll go into a little bit of detail on the separate aspects like the player controller, the health and damage system. I'll do a final showcase of the build that I've done, the first complete encapsulated build. And then I'll do some of the reflections, things that I've learned, and then we'll do a moving forward stage if there's time, where I will cover some of the things that I have to, move on to, and we might continue actually starting with one of those. Otherwise, we'll do it in the next live stream, depending on how much time we have. We have until 3 o'clock, so that's about just over 50 minutes, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so the first section before we go on is that I would ask you very kindly to like the video and share the link as widely as you can so that we can increase the audience for the channel. And then also subscribe if you haven't yet. That way you can get the notifications, and you can also follow me on Discord. The link is in the description of this video. And also, yeah, so you'll see that there's a link to my Ko-fi page, which I will share in the next stage once we move on to actual content. So let's talk about the overall setup, shall we? So the first thing is I'll be talking about the organized project structure that I've settled on, and then I'll talk about some of the code quality and modularity principles that I've also come to work with, and also talking about the importance of using Godot documentation comments and test scenes. We'll talk about all of these in more detail, but let's start with the organized project structure. Let me just get that open for you guys. All right, so let me show you this in more detail. So here we go. If I expand this view to be more, here we go. So now I can expand this and show you like that. Okay. So I've sorted out the project according to categories. So there's project metadata, all the things that I use to organize the project that aren't facing the actual game itself as a completed public-facing product. And then I've got folders for different things, some things like the add-ons, any things that, like all the things that I would have added in, so plugins or modules or external software that I would add in that isn't a part of the project directly, but is being used by the project. Those are considered add-ons. So things like Starlight, for example, or the behavior toolkit, which I haven't actually added too much into the project yet. These are all things that you could get on the asset library over here. And then I've got a folder for the assets, which I've separated into fonts, models, sprites, and textures. And this is just to keep everything neat and tidy. Before this, I actually didn't have as much of an organization structure, and it actually does help a lot. One of the things that I've noticed is there's this cognitive load that gets like put in front of your mind as soon as you open up a project that isn't structured in this way, because you see this like extremely dense folder of all these parts and things, and your mind automatically um, kind of hesitates to become engaged. And the best way to deal with that, of course, is to compartmentalize and structure your project in such a way that everything looks light. And anytime you open up a folder, there isn't too many things inside. And that makes it a little bit easier. Your brain is more accepting of the amount of things in that folder. And yeah, so I've got one for scenes, the different kinds of scenes. So the main scene, test scenes, which we'll talk about, components, entities, and UI elements. Then I've got one for scripts and the different types of scripts and how they are categorized. And I've got one for any kind of script templates. So I don't want to go too much into this, but these are like templates if you wanted to make variants, or you have something that you want to adapt for a specific case, but you don't want to start over every time. That's where a template comes in handy. Right? The next thing we were supposed to talk about was code quality, of course. So let's go into one of the scripts that I've already covered. Well, not covered, but I mean tidied up. So one of the things I want to mention in terms of code quality, there's two kinds of code quality, right? So the first one is aesthetic quality. So what does it look like to someone who's working on your code? Is it neat and tidy, or is it a mess? Does it have unnecessary comments? Does it have too few? Does it have very clearly defined and easily understood variable names, or is it all vague and short and unspecific? You'll see what I mean when we open one. So let me open up the player controller. And here it is. Let me just get that up here. Okay. So as you can see, the player controller, which is called playerbehavior.gd, which stands for GD script, and you can see that I've columnized everything, right? So it's all columnar, and everything is where you expect it to be. All the variable names are neat and like well named. They aren't vague or short or abbreviated or any of those kind of things. And you can see like the assignment or the so-called equals operator, because assignment and equality are not the same thing, but some of you might know that, the rest of you probably might not. I don't want to get into that right now, but all the operators, so like these colons over here, you can see these are the type operators in GD script. So anything following this colon will specify the type of a variable. It's not necessary, it's optional in GD script to specify the type. But it is good practice if you know the type to specify the type, and you know that it won't be anything else. If you know that it won't be, for example, that this isn't going to be anything else besides a Boolean, then specify that it's a Boolean. It just makes things easier for the person reading your code, and it also makes it easier for Godot to actually interpret your code. Makes it a little bit faster. So as you can see, all the types are in the same space, or like in the same columns, and all the assignments are in the same place, and everything is neat and everything is tidy. And wherever necessary, I have collapsed functions and separated them by at least 3 lines. And this is good because now I can very clearly see, okay, so there are these functions. And if I ever need to work on one, like in this case with input, I have opened it up. And now I can go in and I can see if I need to change a variable, I can change it. And if I don't, then I can collapse it again and move on. Now let's look at one of the files that isn't tidied up this way. Something like sorry, those are documentations. Okay, so that so as you can see here, we've got documentation for one of the scripts that I've written. I was hoping not to do it in this way, but you know, serendipitous. Let's open up the enemy ship behavior GD file. Okay, so this one is also neat and tidy, but here you can see as well that I've done the Godot documentation comments. Right, so these an ordinary comment, as you can see if you go to player behavior, has a single hash, right? That means ordinary comment, and it's gray, right? It's gray, meaning that both the compiler will ignore it, and the person reading it can also ignore it unless they want to see what you actually wrote as a comment. Whereas if you go to enemy behavior or enemy ship behavior, it's green, it's not gray, and it's got two hash symbols. And this means that it's using Godot documentation. So whatever you write here, if you've made it into a class, so that's where the class name comes in. If you made it into a class, it will end up as a part of the documentation. So you can see here the left gun of the enemy ship, and you'll see there left gun. Yeah, the left gun of the enemy ship. And that's very cool, and it helps a lot. So if I'm sharing this project with someone else who's working with me, they'll be able to look at my documentation file and see, for example, without even opening this GD script file, what the variables are, what they actually represent, what the functions are and what they do, what do they take as input, and all of those kind of things. So that was the documentation that I mentioned, the Godot docs comments. Now coming back to quality, let's try and find one that I haven't tidied up yet. So okay, so pause menu is tidy, as tidy as I can make it, and pause manager also, orbit camera. Okay, so it seems that I've tidied up most of my project. Yeah, okay, this one. This one isn't as tidy as the rest. As you can see, the assignment and type operators are not all in the same place. And the functions are separated by 3 lines, but they aren't collapsed. So that's a bit better. And then target behavior, pause menu, pause manager. Okay, anyway, so this is all tidy and neat, which is good, of course. It means I've done my job well. And so now the next step to talk about would be modularity. So if I move back to the editor and I make this a doc again, like that. Okay, so now I go to, for example, the player ship. You can see that if I open up the inspector like this, here we go, you'll see that they are all the nodes associated with the player. Okay, and that's good. It means that we can edit the player as we need to here in this scene, and any other scene that contains the player ship will automatically update those changes. And if I go in, for example, to the firing range, you'll see that the player is there, but if I choose the player ship, I can't see any of those children, the children of that node, unless, for example, I say make the children editable, and then you'll see that they are yellow. And this means that I'm dealing with a prefab or an established node, right? An established scene. And any changes I make here are local. They are not global. For example, if I go here and I make a change, it will change this one automatically as well. unless I say specifically make these changes local. For example, I can say here, make local. This will separate it from the original scene, and any changes I make to the original scene will not be propagated into this version at all. And that might be useful in some cases, but not in this case. So we'll just undo that. All right. And I think that covers everything. Oh yes, okay, test scenes. Let me just show you some of the test scenes, right? So when I come to test scenes, you'll see here, I've got one for testing flights, I've got one for the firing range, and I've got one for testing seek behavior. And then I've also got one to test the health bar, right? The point of all this is to explain that one of the key aspects for doing prototyping, which is what I'm doing right now, right? So I'm in the middle of prototyping, which is the first step in game development. You have an idea or a design, and then you want to validate that design with a prototype. So you create something that will test the mechanics that you want to implement, and then you expose that to people, right? Playtesters, friends, people in the community, and you ask them for feedback. And once they give you that feedback, you can explain or experiment and see how you thought something was obvious, but it wasn't. And prototyping will reveal that it's not actually obvious, and that you will need to do further development to make sure that it is obvious. And if you don't need it to be obvious, or if it's not necessarily like critical to the gameplay, then you can ignore that and focus on other things that are critical. All right, so let's go on to the next stage, which is the player controller. So I'll be talking about making the player controller as intuitive as possible in terms of controls. And then I'll just demonstrate how responsive and like how it works. And then also I'll mention the Z drift bug very briefly. It's not a big deal, and I can fix it later. For now, I have more important progress to make in the game. And once I've done those things, I can come back and fix that. And then also, once I've finished the prototype and exposed it to you as the audience and to my playtesters, then we'll reveal if the Z drift is in fact a bug, or if I can just leave it as a feature, right? You'll see what I mean once I demonstrate. So let's open up test flight over here. So in this scene, I've set up the player ship, as you can see over there, and I've also placed these markers quite far away from the player, and also a lot bigger than the player, as you can see over there. And these just mark off the axes, right? So that's the Z axis, the X axis, and the Y axis. And if I hadn't done this, it would have been a lot more difficult for me and for anyone testing to know exactly how the player ship is moving in response to the controls that I've set up. If I open up the controls over here, player controller, here it is, and I go down to the input file, you'll see here, okay, so this is all the controls, and here are all the inputs. So in input, we've got the movement, and we've got the rotations, right? So roll, pitch, and yaw, those are just the terms used to denote the rotations. And then over here, it's handling all of those. All right, so if they press the brakes, then set the speed by using linear interpolation towards 0 in steps of 1, and so on. the best way to explain this is to show you by actually running the scene. So let's do that. We'll run the scene. All right, so you can see I can move the player around, right? So moving the mouse left and right will rotate left and right. Moving the mouse up and down rotates up and down. And then when I press A or D on the keyboard, right, which usually comes to left or right, it actually does the tilt, right? So that's like this. And what happens, for example, if I disorient myself and I don't know which way is up anymore, then I've got the F key for fix, and that will fix my rotation, and now I'm facing up again, right? So now up is up, and down is down. And if I press forward or back, that will accelerate or decelerate. So let's test that. I accelerate, and now I'm going at full speed. And as you can see, the distances are quite fast. And now I can do all the movements while I'm moving. So for example, I can do those orbits, or I can do these orbits and fly in like circles, do loops. And I can also decelerate, and I can go backwards if I wanted to. And if I press X, that's hard brake, and that will always go towards 0. So if I do a brake, it won't stop at 0, it will go back in towards it, like reverse. But if I press the X key, it will do a hard brake. All right, and now the other thing I can show you is shooting. So for example, I can left click, will fire a projectile. And these aren't actual targets, so it's not going to damage them. I'll show you the actual collisions of projectiles and how that damages things and so on after this. But let me just show you what I mentioned before about the so-called Z-drift bug. Right, so if I come to a hard brake and I start doing movements like this, you'll see that I'm actually doing rotation when I shouldn't be, right? So if I do this, you'll notice that the red square is rotating when it shouldn't, right? And if I press the F key, that proves that it actually was rotating when I shouldn't have been. I shouldn't have been rotating like this, but I was. All right, and that's not good. Well, we'll see, right? So I can do play tests and see if that actually matters. Does it actually matter? One of the things that I thought of adding is a up arrow on the cursor, the crosshair, so you can see which way is up, right? And it will automatically update according to your rotation. So if I turn like this, then the up arrow will turn in the opposite direction to show you which way up was or still is. And then when I correct, it will bring the up arrow back towards up. All right, so when I press escape, I get my cursor back, and it also shows me the controls, as you can see over there. It advises me to press escape if I need to see the controls, and I can also go towards any of these, right? So I can open up the main menu, for example, or I can quit. In this case, let's quit, because there are other things I need to do. Like show you the health and damage system, right? The system for health and damage. So I'll be talking about projectile collision, all right? And then I'll do the health bar UI feedback. So showing you that the projectile actually hits the target and that it actually affects the health bar of the target. And then I'll talk a little bit about Godot signals and how useful they actually are and why it makes sense to use them in that way, right? So if I open up my file system, I'll show you the Okay, you know what? Let me show you this first. So I'll show you the health bar in the 2D scene, and I'll run this. Okay, so when I press the, was it this? No, it wasn't. It was a key that I was supposed to press. The input was UI home. Okay, pressing the home key. Excellent. Let's do that. So when I press the home key, you'll see that it automatically decreases the health bar. Okay, so that doesn't necessarily mean anything to you, because I could have just programmed it to do that. But if it drops below a certain health, the color of the health bar can change. And I can tell Godot to make it whatever color I want it to, but in this case I've made it orange. And when it's really low, it goes red until it's done. All right, that's the health bar test scene to make sure that the logic for the health bar itself works. Again, coming back to modularity, right? So making sure that these nodes work before adding them to larger scenes is vital, right? So if it works correctly, then I can go towards using something like a Godot signal, which will trigger a function or a set of code that I've already established in this scene, which will do the update that I showed you now. So decrease the health bar, update the health amount, change the color if required, and so on. And now if I go, for example, to firing range, I can show you that firing a projectile will impact those targets over there and update their health. All right, so this is using the health bar and the scenes that I've showed you before in a larger scene as a smaller component. So I can come closer just to make it easier, right? So I can fire deliberately to miss, so you'll see that it does nothing. And now I'll fire deliberately to hit, and you'll see that it does something. And I can hold down left click as well, and it will continue to fire automatically. And there they destroyed the target. Okay, there's no explosions or particles or anything yet, because again, like I mentioned, this is still prototyping. And adding all of those things in while making it visually appealing is not necessarily the best thing to do, because I might decide not to use any of this later. And then the time and effort I've invested to making it like look good would have been counterproductive, right? It would have taken more time than required to test the mechanic, which would inevitably be discarded. And so then I've wasted time and effort and resources and everything. All right. And so as a principle, we do practical prototyping as opposed to perfect prototyping, perfectionist prototyping, where everything is neat and tidy and clean and polished. That comes later. We can make it work and then make it look nice. All right, so now I can show you something, for example, where I'm flying as I can, and do dynamic shots. Maybe slow down a bit just so it's easier. And so the health bar is actually updating as I do that. Yes, we did it. Excellent. So for now, there's no impact on the player if he collides or she collides. If the player collides with a target, nothing actually happens to the ship because I haven't actually programmed that yet. And that's okay. We can add that in later. But for now, we are only testing the responsiveness of the enemy's health when it's hit with projectiles. So you can see that the projectile actually registers when it hits, and the health is being updated, and the health bar is being decreased, which is perfect, exactly what I want. And so now I can escape this, and we can go back to the script files and talk about signals. All right, so here you can see the keyword signal, which denotes that I'm defining a signal. Okay, so the signal in this case is called change health bar texture, and it takes in a variable called new texture. And if I come down here, you can see I've got some so I've predefined health bars over here on top. So there's the green, orange, and red, and the locations that I have them saved in my project folder. And we can actually find that over here. So it says assets, textures, no, assets, sprites. Okay, so in the sprites folder, you'll see, there we go. So full health, low health, danger health, and some of the crosshair files. Now let's open up this again. Okay, so if the player is, if the health is being updated, so here, so here you can see, for example, the keyword or the function for emitting a signal, right? So I've already defined this signal up here, max health changed, and it takes in a new health value, a new max health value, all right? And here I'm emitting that signal, which will call this particular signal with this value. And what that will do is it will, sorry, I'm just trying to figure out where I connected my signal. Let me just see. Health display. Okay, don't worry about that. We'll figure that out in a second. So yeah, for example, if the player presses the home key, then it calls this function, update health bar, with a value and the max value, and here's where that function is defined. So we take in current health, and then if the max health value times a half, right? So half of the max health is still larger than the value, then we set the health bar texture down towards orange. And then again, if the health of the player or the target is less than a quarter, then we update it towards red. All right, so we can change these values as we need to, and it will change the margins or the thresholds before the health bar color changes. Okay, so let's move on before we run out of time. the next thing we need to talk about is the actual build that I mentioned very briefly. And that's this over here. All right, so this is the build version 0.0.1. And I've named that specifically because it is the first actual build that functions, right? So it's got a menu and it's got a README and it's got everything that I need to publish onto a platform that you as the audience or anyone else can access and test. And it's not a complete version of the game, so it's not version 1.0.0. There's still a very long way to go, and it's only a prototype, and so that's why I've flipped it around 0.0.1. Let me show you the executable first, and then I'll talk about the README. And yeah, so there's a plan to make shorts to promote these live streams. But as you can see, we are running out of time, so I don't want to go into that too much. Let me run this, okay? And we'll see how that works. All right, so we've opened up the main menu. It's not much of a main menu. Like I said, we are in very early days of development, and investing in a full-on, well-polished menu is not the best use of time. There are more important things that I need to test and develop and work on before we invest in a full-blown menu. All right. Oh, oops. I see that I've used the wrong display. Okay. So these are the different scenes, right? The test scenes that I mentioned. Okay, so there's test flight that I showed you. Here's firing range that I've showed you. And here's another one called testing seek behavior. So this isn't actually for the player. This is for the enemy. So when I open up testing seek behavior, you'll see there are these little hoops and a red spaceship, which is the enemy ship, supposed to be the pirate ship. But for now, that's the placeholder. It's not the actual pirate ship that I'm going to use. So when the pirate ship reaches a destination waypoint, as I call it, there is an enemy ship controller node somewhere in the background of the operating, the operation of this build, and that designates a new waypoint to the enemy ship and says, okay, well, so again using signals, right? So when the enemy reaches waypoint 3, it lets the enemy ship controller, it lets him know, and it's like, oh, I've reached waypoint 3, and then enemy ship controller goes, okay, go to waypoint 8, for example. All right, and then it's like, okay, now you're going towards waypoint 1. But if I wanted to test the responsiveness of my enemy ship's seek behavior, for example, then I've programmed deliberate control. So I can set exactly which waypoint I want this thing to go towards, right? So it's going towards 3, I don't want it to, I can say go 9. And when I press on the num keys, num key 9, it will go immediately towards waypoint 9. And what happens if mid-flight I wanted to go towards waypoint 2, I can press num2 and it automatically will switch. All right, so now I've validated my controls and I've proven to, well, in the context of my test scene and the prototype, that the seek behavior of my enemy ship's AI is working perfectly, right? And I can set it towards any of these waypoints, like 8 and then 5 and then 6 and then 4, and it will just keep updating as it needs to. And even more interesting than that is something that I've done, which I've added num key 0 will set a random waypoint mid-flight. All right, so what would happen before is that it would set a random waypoint once it reaches its target, and that happens automatically. So I can keep talking with my hands away from the keyboard and the mouse, and it will just keep doing its thing. Or I can update mid-flight to another random waypoint, and I can just keep pressing num key 0, and it will keep changing its target. So if I zoom in, you'll see it keeps updating its direction to a random waypoint. Okay, so that's that. And the other two you've seen already, right? So firing range, and test flight that I've showed you before, and quit. So that's the build. I don't have to run Godot engine in order to test any of those scenes. I can just run the build now, all right? Although now any changes I make inside Godot engine will not affect the build unless I do another build. And so there are pros and cons, as you can see. The other thing that I needed to show was the README file. So let's open up that. So if I need to, for example, send this off to somebody, they can look at the README file and see, okay, so these are the controls, and these are the key scenes, and there's an overview, when I built it, on what platform I built it for, how to install it, and so on. There are current limitations, so mouse movements can cause unwanted rotation. So that's the so-called Z drift that I talked about. And to fix that, you just press the F key and it will recenter. Okay, so because the build is very small and there isn't much to it, the README is also very small and there isn't much to it as well. So the last stage I want to talk about is the reflections. All right, so how do I feel about the game's progress? Let me just think about this for a second. So development hasn't gone as quickly as expected. And the reason for that is that this isn't the only project I'm working on. I've got 2 other games that I'm developing. And I've also got duties and responsibilities in my personal life, as you can imagine. So development on this is going quite slowly. And the other reason that this isn't gone as quickly as it should have was because I had decided to do pre-recorded videos for YouTube initially, which was not the best choice personally for me. And that is because a pre-recorded video is a polished production. And this channel is not meant for that. All right, by the name itself, DevVenture with MTK is a development adventure with me, MTK. And if I do a pre-recorded video, it's not a DevVenture. It's not a development adventure anymore. It's more of a dev report, right? A development report. I did these things and I'm telling you afterwards that I've done these things. So this is also technically, this live stream is technically still a dev report. But moving forward, it won't be, because I won't have done things that I'm talking about. I'll be doing things as I talk about it. All right. And that is the actual value proposition of this channel, is a vicarious experience in game development. So whether you are an actual game developer, or if you are a gaming enthusiast, or if you're someone who is curious about going into game development, but you don't know what to expect, then this is the offering, right? That you can see what it's like to be a game developer, what it's like to encounter a bug and not understand what's going on or how to fix it, and then have to figure that out. And also experiencing the highs and the lows of game development, right? So when something works and when it doesn't. And I see that I'm still showing you the reflections page as opposed to me. So yeah, so the in terms of the progress for the game, it could have gone faster if I was only working on this, but I'm still happy with the progress we've made. I have a working player ship that can move and shoot, and it's only got one quirk, which isn't that big, at least by my estimations. And then I've also mentioned my plan for the channel. All right, so I was originally planning on doing pre-recorded videos, and I realized that firstly, it takes too long to make a video, and it takes too much from me to make that video. All right, and I've got, like I mentioned, I've got other projects I need to work on as well. So I don't necessarily have that much time to invest in a pre-recorded video. So I decided to switch over to live streams, and this is the first of those live streams, right? And it fits the spirit of my channel better in any case, that a live stream is a DevVenture with me, with MTK. So the plan for the road ahead in the last like 5 minutes. What is the next thing that I'm going to do? I will investigate further enemy ship behaviors. That's one of the things that I want to do. Another thing is to actually develop the engineer of the mining ship, right? Because remember, like I said in the first video, there are three player types or three ship types, right? So eventually, I want the player to be able to assume any of those three roles, right? So the player should be able to become a mercenary, which is the blue ship you're seeing now, or a pirate, like if I go towards the scenes, the entities here, so the enemy ship. So this is the enemy ship, right? So this is a pirate, technically speaking. And this is the mercenary ship, which is currently being called the player ship. I haven't made modular settings yet for the player to be able to switch the ship, right? So it's still the player controller, but with a different model. I'm planning on doing that later. Once I actually have, not later, but that's one of the things I need to do, of course, is to have that infrastructure in place that I can switch the player's ship so that the player can assume any of those three roles. And then another thing that I need to do is obviously choose the models for each of those player types, right? So the mercenary is currently this blue and black ship, and the pirate is currently this red, like maroon and black ship. And I don't have a model for the miner yet. And so my plan is to actually model the mining ship in one of the upcoming live streams so that you guys can see how I do that. Like, how do I design a ship and actually go ahead and make it and then integrate that into Godot engine. So of these things that I've mentioned, there's a few other things I want to do as well, but these are the main ones, right? Moving forward is investigating enemy, well, not enemy, but NPC AI, right? So the AI for any of the NPCs. So this will eventually affect the miner as well. If you're playing as a pirate or as a mercenary and the miner happens to be an NPC, then these AI behaviors, so navigation like seek and chase and flee and flying in formation and all of these other operations, all of these will affect the miner as well. And if you're playing as the miner or the pirate, then it will affect the players or the mercenary as well, right? So how does the mercenary target a pirate and attack the pirate when protecting the miner, right? So all of these variations, they need to be investigated. And of course, the testing seek behavior will become a test bed, right? So that's one of the reasons why I mentioned a test scene is so important, because now I can go ahead and check if I make these waypoints. So as you can see in the scene view, all of the waypoints are labeled as 0 because they aren't assigned a waypoint ID until the game actually runs. So at runtime, the enemy ship controller will assign a waypoint number to each of the waypoints. And then it will also bind them to the num keys at the same time. So I press num key 1, and that will let the enemy ship controller know that I want the enemy to go towards waypoint 1, whichever waypoint that happens to be. Then the enemy ship controller will adjust the sprite's label to be 1 and send the enemy ship towards that waypoint. So again, back to the modularity stuff, all right? That everything doesn't have to be predefined and exact. I can randomize it if I wanted to. Okay. Now, one of the things that I was telling you was that I want to make different AI behaviors, all right? And if I do that, if I go towards, one moment, let me just open up that. Okay, so here we go. These are tutorials that I was planning on following in order to get those behaviors. All right, so the first one I did was seek, which, as you can see, is working well enough. Then the next thing I need to do is, from among these, I need to choose which one works best for the case that I want, right? So for example, collision avoidance or making a movement manager, which I've already done. I've already got the enemy ship controller, right? But expanding it to control multiple enemies at the same time, right? So that will probably be one of the next steps, is to do the movement manager and have multiple instances of the enemy ship and then coordinating them, right? So if I want to make them go towards the same waypoint at the same time, or if I want to make sure that they don't go towards the same waypoints at the same time, right? So each one is going to their own waypoints, or those kind of coordinations, then the movement manager comes in handy. So that's one of the things to go forward, to do moving forward. And then the other thing that I want to do, like I mentioned, was modeling the miner. So in the comments, you guys are welcome to make your choice, right? And requests, right? So which one do you want me to do first? Do you want me to make the miner ship first, or are you more interested in seeing my development of the AI behaviors, right? So seek and steering and movement controllers, or are you more interested in seeing the configurability of the player's ship, right? So can I change the player towards any of the 3 variants? Whichever one interests you more, you can let me know, and then I will, I'll prioritize that. We can do that one first and move on to the others after. Because again, like I said, this is a DevVenture with me, right? So you are part of this as the audience. You get to make some of those decisions. But before I conclude the live stream, there is one thing that I need to mention, and that is my coffee page. Okay, so there is just give me 1 second. Browser is gonna browse. Okay. So this is my coffee page, and you'll see the link is in the bottom over here. Okay, you're welcome to go over and support me. Um, as you can see, there are memberships as well. Okay, so there are 3 tiers. There's the intern DevVenturer, the junior DevVenturer, and the senior DevVenturer. And I already have a junior DevVenturer, which I want to make a shout out for, and that would be Cubes. So shout out to you, Cubes. Thank you for your support. I appreciate it very much. Um, if you want to see the perks, you can go and see show more, and it'll tell you the actual perks of each of these membership tiers. All right. So it's a monthly donation, and they come with tiers. Right? So they come with perks. My mistake. Okay. So those are the perks. And the other thing you could do is just do a one-time donation if you don't want to have the membership. You could do that. The other way to support me is via the shop. I currently have the Inktober from last year, the collection of that, available for purchase. And junior adventurers get that for free. So junior and senior adventurers. So anyone above the current tier. So if a tier offers a perk, then all the tiers above that will benefit from that same perk. That is the way that I've set things up. So junior and senior adventurers will get this as one of the exclusive content bonuses, right? So I mentioned exclusive posts and messages. So while this isn't necessarily an exclusive, it is available for free to them, and everybody else has to purchase it. So it's still a perk. I do plan on making exclusive content just for them. But I need to actually set that up for now. So for now, that's the offerings, and you guys are welcome to go ahead and support. All right, I think that covers it all, and we are basically out of time. So once again, I will invite you to like, subscribe, and share. Also comment, please. Engagement is important with my content, so that I know, if there's something I can improve, then you are welcome to recommend that to me. And if there is, and then your encouragement or your feedback is also welcome. And then one more thing, just before we close, I want to show you the Discord server that I mentioned. It's in the description for this video and for my channel as well. Here we go. So you can see over here that it will update you as soon as I make content available on any of my platforms. And it's a community, right? So there are locked channels that are locked specifically for my members, right? So interns will have access to the intern adventurers, and the junior and senior guys will have access to the junior one as well. I mean, to the intern one as well. But the intern will not have access to higher tiers. So higher tiers will have access to lower tiers, but not the other way around. All right. And then there are different channels for the different kinds of things, right? So then there's one for the art, one for program, like 3D programming, game programming, and one for DIY electronics and 3D printing. Okay, so that's what I wanted to mention as well, that this channel isn't necessarily exclusive to game development. While that is the primary focus, there will be times where I will investigate other DevVentures, right? So development adventures, things into DIY and electronics, and 3D printing because these are my passions as well. And once I figure out how to do a live stream for those, which is a little bit more physical and dynamic than just a computer with screen capture. Once I have that set up and my camera management is in place, I'll be doing more of that. All right, I'll be doing more 3D printing, more electronics work, and you are welcome to, to express your interest or your disinterest in those topics as well. All right, so while I will continue to make content into all of them, your feedback will be taken into account as well. All right, so I will prioritize the things that I need to do according to your taste as well. So if you want something that is on my list of priorities to be the first thing I do, I will do that. But I will only be focusing on the things that are current priorities. I won't be shifting priorities away from that. Just making sure that that's well understood. Okay, but I think that's enough. We've gone a little bit over the hour already, and I think we can close it off here. So thank you for those of you who joined live. I see we already have our number one commenter, the first comment of the stream. So thank you for making your comment and for joining me on this live stream. And to the rest of you who are either watching currently or once this video is no longer live, thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention and attendance. I appreciate it very much. And I'll see you in the next live stream.